Something just broke in the middle of the ocean. It was not a hull, and it was not a heavy mast, but rather the fragile illusion of safe passage that has underpinned global trade for the last 70 years. A single voice crackling over a high-frequency radio has managed to do what entire navies once struggled to accomplish. Motor vessels, vacate your engine room. This is not a request. And it is not a standard maritime inquiry. It is a direct threat of disabling fire, broadcast into the ears of merchant sailors who thought their only enemies were the weather and the clock. The words are repeated with a chilling, rhythmic precision. Vacate your engine room. There is no negotiation in the tone, only the cold promise of heat and kinetic energy. When an attacker tells a crew to leave the heart of their ship, they are announcing that the vessel is no longer under control, but under the mercy of a drone operator miles away. Stop and listen to that recording again. This is the sound of the world's most vital artery being pinched shut by a force that does not use aircraft carriers or billion-dollar destroyers. It is the sound of asymmetric warfare reaching its logical, terrifying conclusion. We are told that we live in an era of unprecedented connectivity, where a click on a screen in New York moves a container in Shanghai, but that connectivity relies on a few narrow strips of water that most people could not find on a map. One of those strips is the Bab el-Mandeb, the Gate of Grief, where this radio call was intercepted. 12% of all global trade passes through this narrow corridor. Every year, more than 17,000 ships carry everything from crude oil to high-end electronics through these waters. Now those ships are being told to stop, to abandon their engines, and to prepare for the fire. This is not just a story about a few harassed cargo ships, this is a story about the end of the era of the open sea. For decades, the assumption was that if you put a ship in the water, it would get to its destination. That assumption was the foundation of the global economy, and it just evaporated, in a cloud of radio static. Let us go back 72 hours to understand the gravity of this shift. The international community has spent billions of dollars on naval coalitions, task forces, and high-tech surveillance, yet a group with a radio has effectively seized control of the narrative. As reported by maritime security analysts, the vessel targeted in this specific transmission was the motor vessel TSA. It was moving through the southern Red Sea, a region that has become a graveyard for the concept of maritime law. According to sources close to the regional naval command, the threat of disabling fire is a new escalation in a campaign of calculated chaos. When the voice on the radio mentions heat, it is referring to the thermal signature of an incoming missile or a suicide drone. These weapons are designed to find the hottest part of the ship, which is almost always the engine room. By ordering the crew to vacate, the attacker is attempting to minimize casualties while maximizing the strategic damage to the vessel. One senior shipping executive told reporters that the psychological toll on crews is becoming unsustainable. Sailors are not combatants, they are civilians, who signed up to move freight, not to be targets in a geopolitical chess match. When the order comes to vacate the engine room, the ship becomes a ghost, drifting and defenseless. Let us talk about the math. Because the math is what truly terrifies the boardrooms of London and Singapore. A single drone used in these attacks can cost as little as $20,000. The missile used by a modern destroyer can cost upwards of $2 million. You do not need to be a military strategist to see that this is a losing game for the defenders. It is a war of attrition where the side with the cheaper weapons is winning, simply by showing up. The attackers are not trying to win a naval battle, they are trying to make the cost of doing business so high that the world simply gives up on the route. Already, the results are visible on every shipping tracker. The major carriers, including Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, have begun diverting their fleets around the Cape of Good Hope. This adds 10 days to the journey and thousands of miles to the route. It also adds $1 million in fuel costs for every single trip. If you are wondering why the price of your groceries or your fuel is creeping up, look no further than that radio call. This is the invisible tax of instability. When a ship cannot take the short route, the consumer pays for the long one. As reported by Bloomberg, The cost of ensuring a single transit through the Red Sea has increased more than tenfold in the last 3 months. For some vessels, the insurance premium alone is now more expensive than the entire crew's wages for a year. The Gate of Grief is living up to its ancient name. This is not a regional conflict, it is a systemic shock. The Suez Canal, which sits at the northern end of this corridor, is seeing its revenue plummet as ships flee the area. For Egypt, this represents a loss of billions of dollars in vital foreign currency, further destabilizing an economy. But the real story is not the money, it is the power. For the first time in the modern era, a non-state actor has demonstrated the ability to de facto blockade a global choke point. They have done this without a submarine, or a single fighter jet. They have done it with a radio, a drone, and a clear understanding of the world's vulnerabilities. Let that sink in. The most powerful navies in human history are currently patrolling these waters. And yet they cannot guarantee the safety of a single merchant vessel. The technical superiority of the West is being countered by the sheer audacity of the inexpensive. According to a leak from a senior naval officer, the challenge is not detecting the threat but responding to it. The rules of engagement are designed for 20th century wars between nations. They are not designed for a voice on a radio telling a civilian ship to stop. If the Navy fires first, they risk a massive escalation. If they wait, the ship is hit. It is a tactical paralysis that the attackers are exploiting with surgical precision. They are playing a long game, while the defenders are reacting to every move in real time. Let us rewind to the history of maritime security to see why this is such a radical departure. Since the end of the Second World War, the United States Navy has acted as the world's policeman on the high seas. This was the deal. The world gets free trade and the US provides the security. That deal is currently being torn up. The attackers are betting that the international community does not have the stomach for a prolonged, dirty conflict in the Red Sea. They are betting that the world will choose the expensive detour over the dangerous shortcut. The transcript is a receipt of that bet. It shows an attacker who is confident, organized, and completely unafraid of the consequences. The repetition of the commands to vacate the engine room is a psychological weapon, intended to break the will of the mariner before the first shot is even fired. What happens when this tactic spreads? There are other choke points in the world. The Strait of Hormuz, the Malacca Strait, and the Panama Canal are all vulnerable to similar forms of asymmetric pressure. If the Red Sea model is successful, it will be exported to every corner of the globe. We are looking at a future where geography once again dictates the wealth of nations. For 30 years, we believed technology conquered distance, but you cannot digitize a container of grain, and you cannot send oil through a fiber optic cable. You still have to move it through the water. And if that water is no longer safe, the world becomes much smaller. Much more expensive place. One analyst at the Brookings Institution noted that we are seeing the re-territorialization of the oceans. The high seas are no longer a global common, but a series of contested zones. The response from the international community has been a patchwork of operations with names like Prosperity Guardian. But these operations are struggling to find a clear objective. Do they escort every single ship? Do they strike the launch sites? Every option carries a risk that no one is quite ready to take. Meanwhile, the voice on the radio continues, "Motor vessels, vacate your engine room." It is a haunting refrain that will likely define maritime history. Of the mid-20s, it is the sound of a system that was built for stability being dismantled by those who thrive in the shadows. In the coming weeks, we will see if the world's powers find a way to silence that voice. But even if they do, the damage is done. The secret is out. The global supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and that link is currently glowing red on a radar screen in the Bab el Mandeb. If you find this analysis useful, hit the like button right now and subscribe to the Daily Brief. We are tracking these developments 24 hours a day to give you the context that the mainstream headlines often miss. The world is changing faster than the news cycle can keep up with. And you need to know why. We have arrived at a point where the distinction between war and commerce has blurred into a single, grey reality. The merchant sailor in the engine room is now on the front line of a war they never asked to join. Their safety is the currency being traded in a high-stakes game of geopolitical poker. The question we must ask ourselves is not just how to stop the attacks, but what kind of world we are willing to pay for. Are we willing to accept a world where trade is a privilege, granted by the strongest or the most aggressive, or will we find a way to restore the principles of the open sea? Let us look at the three possible paths forward. The first is the total militarization of trade. This would involve permanent naval escorts for every major shipping lane, a massive undertaking that would cost hundreds of billions of dollars and likely lead to frequent skirmishes. The second path is the fragmentation of the global economy. In this scenario, countries move their supply chains closer to home, a process known as nearshoring or friendshoring. This would reduce the reliance on long-distance maritime routes but would also lead to higher prices and lower economically growth for everyone. The third path is a new diplomatic settlement that addresses the root causes of the instability. This is the most difficult path, as it requires cooperation between rivals who currently have no reason to trust each other. It would mean bringing the actors behind the radio calls to the table and finding a price for peace that everyone can live with. None of these options are easy, and none of them are fast. In the meantime, the ships will continue to divert, the insurance rates will continue to climb, and the voice on the radio will continue to broadcast its terrifying instructions: vacate your engine room. The motor vessel TSA may just be one ship, but it represents the vulnerability of every ship. It is a reminder that in the age of the surgical laser, a simple radio command can still be effective. As we watch the situation in the Red Sea unfold, we must remember that this is not just about the ships, it is about the food on your table, the fuel in your car, and the very structure of the modern world. The gate of grief is open, and we are all passing through it. There is a final, darker irony in the transcript we started with. The attacker uses the word prepared. We are prepared to subject you to disabling fire. It is a word that implies a long period of planning, a deep understanding of the target, and a total commitment to the outcome. The question is, was the world prepared? The evidence suggests that we were caught looking the other way, distracted by traditional threats while the new face of war was being built in a garage with off-the-shelf components, and a clear sense of purpose. As we move deeper into this decade, the events in the Red Sea will be seen as a turning point. They will be studied in military academies and business schools alike as the moment when the old rules were rewritten by a voice on the radio. The heat mentioned in the transmission is not just the heat of a missile. It is the heat of a world that is becoming increasingly volatile and unpredictable. It is the friction of a global system that is grinding against its own limitations. We will continue to monitor the receipts of this conflict, from the shipping manifests to the naval logs. Every data point tells a story of a world in transition, a world where the engine room is no longer a safe place to be. Keep your eyes on the coordinates, and keep your ears on the radio. The next broadcast might not be for a motor vessel in the Red Sea. It could be for any one of the thousands of links that hold our civilization together. The silence of the open sea has been broken, and it is not coming back anytime soon. Which country comes out of this stronger, the one that built the most expensive ships, or the one that figured out how to stop them for the price of a car? The answer to that question will determine the balance of power for the next 50 years. When the dust settles and the radio static finally clears, which nations will have stood for the freedom of the seas? And which will have simply survived the storm? The choice is being made right now, in the engine rooms and the control centers of the world. This is the Daily Brief. We provide the analysis, you decide. The impact? If you want to stay ahead of the curve on global security and economic shifts, make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on. The world is changing, and we are here to. As we conclude this deep dive, take one last look at that transcript. It is a short text, but it contains the entire future of global competition. Vacate your engine room, the engine of the world is stopping. And we are all waiting to see what happens when it does. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay prepared, and as always, keep an eye on the horizon. The story of the Red Sea is far from over.